20% of your final grade is that culminating activity or final exam, and then 80% is the, 80% is all of this. Units 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then 20% of your final grade is going to be the final exam. So, starting off with New Year, just always good to review this. You do have ways to watch and listen live, so if you're watching this on a USB stick or on the YouTube channel, know that you can tune in live if you can from 10 to 10:55 Central Time from Monday to Thursday. So then there's 4 ways you can do that. Phoning into the studio, listening to 91.9 FM if you're in the Sioux Lookout region, listening to channel 972 on Bell ExpressVu, or by joining us on Zoom. And of course, all the videos are on our YouTube channel. The first 24 classes are on there. You can look at playlists. So I've organized the playlist by units. So you can go to a specific unit, or you can just watch all the videos and just watch them 1 through 24, whatever the case may be. It's always there waiting for you. So you have many ways to submit your work. As always, reach out to your DEC, reach out to your learning center, phone the WASA office, send us a Facebook Messenger request. There is a new WASA Facebook page, so look up WASA on Facebook, join WASA there. Of course, you can always talk to me directly, which is the best case scenario, especially if you have questions related to this course specifically. So send me an email, find me on Facebook, phone me at my office in Sioux Lookout. That's the 807-737 number 1488 extension 2211, or just ask for Mike, or phone our free long distance number. And do that Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. That's the best time to get in touch with me. And this is by phone, email, or messenger, right? If you want to ask me a question, if you want to get in touch with me, and you want a quick response, then the best way to do it is to do it during those times from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. So here's where you should be. Here's your next step. So you should have read all the pages. Everything in units 1 and 2 should be read. You should have read about the first 2/3 to 3/4 of unit 3. All of your assignments in Unit 1 and 2 at this point should be kind of wrapped up and taken care of, and you should be now transitioning into assignments 30 and beyond. So assignments 30 to 39, that covers Unit 3. So that's where you should be. If you want to pace yourself and be on track, you want to be on assignments 30 through 39. So today we'll do our words of the day. We'll look at today's headline. We will look at assignments 37, 38, and hopefully 39, which are the final assignments of Unit 3. So our learning goals are to look at examples of resumes to create a model of our own, review the process of using a graphic organizer as planning for an information paragraph, and we're once again going to look at the writing process for completing a journal entry. That's assignment 39. So you'll know you're successful if you can create a chronological resume of your own. Use a graphic organizer to create an outline for an information paragraph. I would say, well, create an outline for the paragraph, and actually write the paragraph. And you're going to practice the writing process to complete your journal entry. Okay, so up on the board, before we do our words of the day, I've got our images of the day. So I've got these 2 political cartoons. So the first one reads Social Network, Then and Now. So over the weekend, I was actually reading a book, and there was a really interesting paragraph where they were talking about how the glow of a cell phone screen, it kind of triggers the same parts of the brain that happens when you sit around a campfire and stare at it. So this political cartoon is kind of really on the money. And I want to touch on this a little bit, the idea of having a network, having a bunch of people that that can help you, that you can rely upon. So networking might seem like a new concept, something that humans have only done since the age of technology, but we've been networking for, thousands, if not, millions of years, where your network is your community, right? It's the people in your life, and whether you talk to them on a screen or you talk to them in person, they're still your network. So I'm going to touch upon that when we talk about, drafting a resume and sort of selling yourself as a person. And then the second political cartoon says, I remember when show and tell was a kid with a frog and not some video presentation. My youngest son is doing his show and tell today, but he's doing it old school. He's actually bringing in something to show his friends. But I think at the core of a lot of these messages is how much things have changed. And I know as a parent of 2 young boys, you get a little bit sort of overwhelmed with how much time they spend on screens. And of course, here we are delivering education through a screen, through broadcast. But yeah, it's just something to think about as you go along your education journey, and just finding the things that work for you. But yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about learning, how we learn, how we absorb information, how we share information, how we give information to other people. Got a couple of words up on the screen. The Anishinaabe word is Gikinawabi, which is a verb, which means she or he learns by observation. I got the English word learn, a verb, which is to acquire knowledge of or skill in by study, instruction, or by experience. From the Old English Leornian, learn or teach. Related, sorry, look at that, I spelled related wrong. Oops, that's not right. Related to the Germanic word for lore, okay? And lore is just like all of the knowledge about a particular people or a particular field of study. It's sort of like everything. Let's shift that over here. We've got a couple of more Anishinaabe words. We've got Nanda, Gikendan. This is seek to know it, seek to learn it. That's a verb. Or Nita Wichike is a verb, which is she or he is skilled at something, knows how to make things, okay? And then we see that same word structure, right? So that G-I-K-I seems to be a prefix in the language that has to do with learning and observing things. In English, we have network. So in this case, a network is a verb, and it's to cultivate people who can be helpful to one professionally, especially in finding employment or moving to a higher position. So a network is something you do, but it's also a thing, right? Like you have a network, but it's also something you do. And right, I love the word cultivate. So usually we use that word cultivate when we're talking about growing things. Cultivation is when you grow something. So when you network it, you're always kind of growing it. And that could mean adding more people to your network, or just developing stronger relationships with people in your life. And there are people who can help you professionally, finding jobs, or just achieving your goals, right? The other one is instruct, a verb, to furnish with knowledge, especially by a systematic method, teach, train, educate. Furnish is an interesting verb, right? So we talk about furnishing an apartment, just putting the information in there. So I think, as a teacher, the best teachers, they don't just simply pour a bunch of knowledge into your brain, and you don't just sit there and just copy everything they say. They are sort of giving you the tools for you to do it on your own, right? And I think that comes into play a lot with this course, with the Ontario Literacy course. So we're not really teaching you about specific novels and specific information, and you're not memorizing a bunch of dates. It's not like that. This course is really trying to give you skills that you could use in any situation or any profession or any job you might have in the future. This course is supposed to give you those skills. Primarily the skills of reading and writing, right? But of course those come with a lot of other associated skills, but those are the big ones, right? So and you just think about teaching somebody how to read, right? You can't sit there and teach them every single word. There's just too many. You have to give them a sort of a framework, and you have to give them tools and skills so they can eventually figure it out for themselves, right? So and that kind of leads us to our article of the day. So we're gonna think about about reading now. So in this article from the Globe and Mail, they published it today. It says Sweden looks to Canada as it launches Truth Commission into treatment of Indigenous people. So we got our photograph, and the caption reads, Geraldine Shingoose at her Winnipeg home on January 6th. And that photograph is attributed to Shannon Van Rahies, the Globe and Mail, right? So remember when we're talking about the components of an article, we have, we have headlines. We have headlines, we have photos, we have captions, and over here we've got a photo credit. So we've got the photographer gets her credit, right? So sometimes the photographer is a writer and a photographer. Sometimes it's different, right? Some person writes it, some person takes the pictures, but in this case, she's the journalist who took this picture. So we'll just break down that headline as we look at the parts of speech. So looking at language, kind of zooming in and looking at the really small details. So there's our headline with our parts of speech divided out. Sweden is, of course, a proper noun. It's a specific person, place, or thing. So it's capital S, Sweden. What did they do? They look. They looks. Where are they looking? To Canada. Canada is, of course, another proper noun. As is my conjunction. So it links the two ideas, right? So we know that Sweden is looking to Canada. The word as joins the next part of it, right? So as it. It is a pronoun. Remember, pronouns always refer back to a noun. So this one refers back to Sweden. So as Sweden launches a verb, right? So they're launching a commission, but it's not just any commission. It's a truth commission, right? So truth modifies the word commission. Into and of, these are prepositions. They're relationship words. The treatment of Indigenous people. So in this case, it's the Sami people, the Indigenous people who live who lived in the area that became Sweden. But, they had been there for thousands of years, and now they're looking to see what Canada's done as they try to sort of address the what's happened to the Sami people over the years. So here is the breakdown of the article. So that's the first, I would say, 5 paragraphs of this article. So it's always good to look at examples of writing and to sort of copy it, emulate it, see what we can borrow from it. Just break it down and see what we can learn, okay? So here's the lead paragraphs, the hook and the setup. Geraldine Shingoose wasn't quite sure what to think of the email that landed in her inbox from the Canadian Embassy in Sweden. So that's the hook, right? So when you produce, I wouldn't say every form of writing, but a lot of forms of writing, especially in newspaper articles and essays and, blog posts and even Facebook posts, right? It's nice to kind of grab your reader's attention right off the bat. So what they've done is they've tried to picture they want to picture you. They want you, the reader, to picture Geraldine as she gets an email from the Canadian Embassy in Sweden, right? So she's kind of caught off guard. She's surprised by it. So that's the hook. That's the hook. And that's followed by the setup, right? For years, comma. So there we go. We have that's an introductory clause, right? Or sorry, introductory phrase, followed by a comma. Miss Shingoose had spoken to school groups, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, the TRC, and even Montreal Canadiens goaltender Carey Price about the abuses she suffered in Canada's state-funded residential school system. So that's our setup, okay? So it's telling us who this woman is, who she's spoken to, and this sort of explains, she's a high-profile person in this area, and why the embassy reached out to her to help. This paragraph, where we transition into the main content of the article. Now that same state wanted to press her into diplomatic service, requesting her presence in, of all places, Stockholm, which is the capital of Sweden. Here's our quote from the subject of the article. I was pretty shocked to receive an invite like that, said the Saulteaux grandmother, who was from the Tutinawas Ibenge, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, Treaty Reserve in Manitoba, and now lives in Winnipeg. But the request intrigued her, right? So this is interesting. This is a really short paragraph that sets up the next ones, right? So we know she's intrigued. She's interested. I don't have the whole article up here, but I'm assuming that the Sami people in Sweden faced a similar situation to Indigenous people in Canada, where they were forced to attend state-funded schools, and they had their culture stripped away from them, and it did a lot of damage to them as a people. And now the Swedish government is trying to do something to maybe not fix that, but at least address it and make life better for these people. So hopefully that's what they're doing, and that's why they're looking to other countries like Canada, who, and I wouldn't say that Canada has all this figured out, and there's still lots of work to do, but they are looking to Canada and saying, like, okay, like, what have you guys done? Is it working? We're trying to do something similar. And it's great that they're reaching out to Indigenous people to do that, not just talking to the government. Okay, and so I'm not going to touch upon this in detail, but assignment 35, we talked about this in our last class. When you're to write an information, you're writing a news report, and so it's always good to look back at. Or to look at examples of professionally released and published articles. Like, I have a subscription to the Globe and Mail. You can't read those unless you pay for it, but there's the Thunder Bay Chronicle Journal. There's the Sulikot Bulletin, Wawate News, and then Yahoo News, Google News. Like, there's so many free news sites out there that are producing professionally published articles, and it's just good to look at them. And anytime you want to make something, it's always good to look at a model and to look at something professional. So if you're a musician, you've got to listen to, like the great artists, and listen to their music and just observe what they do and kind of break it down and try to copy the model and to try and make your own. If you want to be a writer, you have to look at the genre you're writing in and then look at really good examples, right? So if you're going to write an article about Gary, about what happens to Gary in Chapter 9, what you might want to do is you might want to Google snow machine accident, right? And in Canada, unfortunately, there are many snowmobile accidents that do happen. People do go through the ice. It can lead to really tragic circumstances, unfortunately. Sometimes maybe not that sad of an ending, but I guarantee you, if you Google snowmobile accident Canada, you're going to find hundreds of articles, and you can look at them and you can see how they wrote them, and then use that as a template. So again, like, you're not copying the content. You're not just writing down what they've written down, but you're looking at that as a model. And I just think it's a really important way for you to look at things. Every person who creates something, we all do this. Every artist, every writer, every musician, we're always looking at stuff that's been published before us, and we get inspiration from it, and we learn from it. And that's a big way that's a really important way for you to learn how to create something. And this also applies to when you create a resume. So if you're applying for a job, you know, you shouldn't just start writing a resume. You should be working off a template. You should be getting a template online, getting help from an employment center, getting help from somebody in your life. So this is where networking comes in really handy, right? So you need to talk to somebody in your life who's been there before you and say, hey, can I look at your most recent resume? And then you can just simply copy and paste what they've done and then just input your information, which is exactly what this assignment asks you to do. So you're writing a chronological resume, and in your course material, you've got an example of a chronological resume, which, as you can see, is where you list your most recent positions first, and then you go from there, right? So it's the most common one. It's the most common resume that employers expect to see, and it's one that you use when you are in a job right now, or if you haven't, or if you've just recently left a job. The functional skills resume is typically used when you have a gap. So, like, you've been off work for 2 or 3 years. You know, you've been on disability, or something has prevented you from working. And then in that case, you want to showcase your skills more than your work experience, right? And then there's a combination resume. So we're not really going into that, but what you're going to do is write a chronological resume. And you're going to want to format the resume this way. So this is just simply the order, right? So your formatting could also be like the formatting is everything too, like from the size of the font you use, from the colors you use. And I would say, like, you know, this is simply the order here, right? But I would recommend you go for, you know, a simple design. You know, like when you're writing a resume, you don't need a lot of fancy elements. You don't need you don't need graphics. You don't need symbols. You really just need words, right? You just need words on the page. It needs to be organized, right? There needs to be clear organization, right? But keep it simple. Have a very clear organization. I would say, you know, bold slash, you know, large font. For your headings and things like that, you know, each one of these is going to be a heading, right? So, but yeah, you want to keep it simple. It needs to look good, but you don't need to add lots of bells and whistles. So, and we talked a bit about this last week, but I felt like I was rushed. So I just want to cover it in a little bit more detail. So, for this assignment, you're putting in your name and your address, and you can do this a few ways. But for the purposes of this assignment, choose one of two options. So either center it at the top, or put it on the left-handed margin, right? So this is centered, or have that nice kind of justified, let's try that again, nice straight line here on the left-hand side. So pick one of those options. List your objectives. So your objective is a short statement, and it's where you tell the employer why you want the job and why they should keep reading. Okay, so be short and simple, but just tell them why you want the job and why they should keep reading, right? So if you can achieve those two things, then that's great. You know, it should be about, you know, this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is, you know, this is about 15 to 20 words. And this is your elevator pitch. So I talked about the elevator pitch before. This is when you walk into an elevator and there's somebody really important in the elevator that can change your life. So the example I read this in is in a screenwriting book. So like a director you really admire or a producer. You've got 10 seconds to give them your idea. So take that approach with the employer, right? So you really want the job and you see that person in the elevator. You've got 10 seconds to get their attention. And this is sort of like your hook, okay? We talked about the hook as it relates to a news article. So how do you get their attention? So this is why, you know, this is who I am, and this is why you should hire me, okay? Now that you've got their attention, you go on to the next part, okay? So you list your experience, okay? And so it's called reverse chronological order. It's most recent followed by less recent. So in this case, this individual worked as a youth counselor at Camp North, Birch Island, Ontario, from July to August. Both of these experiences are listed in the year 2021. So when you're writing a resume and you have two jobs and they both occur in the same year, that's when you want to put in the specific months. But let's say, for example, this person worked at a YMCA or something like that from, say, 2018 to 2020. You wouldn't necessarily want to put the months in there. If they only worked that one job in those years, that's fine. But if you have jobs that both occur in the same year, that's when you want to specify. So from July to August, they did this. But from January to May, they were receptionists. So typically the way it goes is you list the date, then you list the job title, usually all capital letters because a job title is a proper noun. So you list the date you worked at it, the name of the position, where that employer is located, and then you want to list what you did. And this is typically done in like point form writing. So it's not I directed recreational activities. You just simply say directed recreational activities, greeted clients, supported staff, answered telephones, managed computer database. So if we look at that, that's not quote unquote proper English. It's not grammatically correct, but that's okay because you're not expected to write in full sentences. And then you could even write this thing using point forms, like bullet points or dashes, or you can just simply use commas to separate it, right? But what you're doing is you're writing down the most important things you did in that job, right? The most important responsibilities and duties you had to do, okay? And that's what the employer cares about, right? They want to see what you did and what you were responsible for, right? So that's what they want to see there. Education, again, it's reverse chronological order, so it's your most recent. So it's not your best education followed by your your less, important qualifications. But it's the most recent stuff you did. So in 2022, this individual obtained their Ontario Secondary School diploma. So you list the date you got it, what you got, and who gave it to you, right? So in this case, Birch Island Distance Education Center, which is, an equivalent to WASA. And in 2021, you got your first aid CPR training, St. John Ambulance, right? So you just simply list the education chronologically, most recent to least recent, right? Depending on how much stuff you're listing in your resume, I would strongly suggest you try to keep that resume to a single page. But if you have room, you might want to put some points in here, right? You might want to say what you specialized in, right? Or like if you went to college for something, you might want to put like, was on the honor roll for this year, right? So if you've got anything special, excuse me, anything you can get their attention with, you want to put it there, right? In point form, right? But if not, that's okay. Then you put your skills, okay? Now, really important here, because I've done a lot of hiring in my lifetime. Make sure you are listing skills. Might seem like really obvious information, but I've read a lot of resumes, and the person lists skills, but they're not skills. Like they are, they're achievements, they're things they've done, or they're things they want to do, or they're experiences they have, but they're not a skill. So leadership is a skill. Organization is a skill. Word processing is a skill. OG Cree language, that's a skill. Like if you can speak that language, that's amazing, right? So, and I would say the more specific, the better, right? So word processing is really good. Like for example, if you tell someone you're good with technology or you're good with computers, those are kind of general. Whereas being good at word processing is very specific. Same thing with like leadership, right? So like what kind of leadership? What did you lead, right? Are you a youth mentor, or did you lead an organization? So how? Same with like organization. Organization is kind of a general term, but if they ask for an organized person, then it's totally fine to list that as one of your skills. But if you can be specific, always be specific, and list your best skills for the job you are applying for, right? So keep it specific to that job. Same with your interests. Your interests are kind of going down the list of importance, but if you can, you should list things that are related to the job, okay? So if you have skills, if you have an interest that is specific to this job, then do that, right? So, and then, like how do you spend time with young people? What kind of reading do you do? What kind of cooking do you do, right? So like, be specific, right? I can tell you that like when I've read lots of resumes, it's nice when the person kind of like jumps off the page, and like if you read 5 or 6 resumes for a job, it can all sort of like sound like the same person with the same qualifications and the same school. But when you start telling your story and you start telling the employer about you and just being real and honest using simple language, it kind of like it tells that person who you are, and it tells them that you've done the research, and it tells them that you're an interesting person, right? That should get this job. Okay, references. Available on request is sort of like a stock phrase that a lot of people use on their resumes, and it's fine. But what I would suggest to you for this assignment or in real life, it's always best to list our references with contact information. So step one, reach out to that person, your reference, and say, hey, I'd like to use you as a reference, and then wait until they respond back positively and say, yeah, I remember you. Sure, you can use me as a reference. So I would say, from speaking from experience, from myself being an employer, I always loved it when the person had a reference ready to go. It's just one less step. It shows that person that you're organized. It shows them that you put the time in, and you know, ultimately, a cover letter and a resume is just step one in you getting a job, but it's a really important step. And it's not a very long document. It's only one page. And that's why you've got to be really careful, and you have to have a lot of attention to detail. And a resume with one mistake, it's not that bad. But a resume with like multiple mistakes on it and sloppy formatting, that you're just telling the employer that I'm unorganized, I'm rushing through stuff, and I'm not paying attention. And you know, just paying attention is really important in life, right? Just knowing what you want and spending the time articulating yourself is really important, right? So that's the message you're trying to communicate to an employer, is like, I'm paying attention, I want this job, you should hire me, because, you know, so it's not just about showing them who you are, by showing the education you have and your interests and your skills. The resume itself speaks volumes about you as a person, right? It says, like, look, I have attention to detail, I can create professional documents, I can communicate, right? And that's why, you know, that's why this course is really important for you, as you move ahead with this. Like, so once you get this course and you get your Ontario Secondary School diploma and you apply to post-secondary education, or you apply for a job, you know, communicating to people professionally is really important, and you don't have to impress them with how many fancy words you know. You just have to communicate a message clearly, and know what you want, and that comes from just thinking about it and spending time and being patient and not being rushed and just thinking about things clearly. And when an employer gets a resume, and it looks good, it's got good formatting, and everything's there, it's organized, it's clear, you're sending a message that, you know, I'm organized, I can do the job, give me that job. Okay, so assignment 38 is asking you to use an organizer for an information paragraph. So throughout this course, we've talked a lot about the planning phase of writing. So anytime you write something, step one is your planning process. So, and I think that's one of the big takeaways that you should be getting from this course, is that anytime you write something, you should. It's very rare that you just start with a blank page and you just start writing. Almost always you are doing some form of planning and getting your thoughts organized and creating some kind of a roadmap for where you want to take this thing. So just as you use the template to create a resume, now you're going to create you're going to create an information paragraph that's about using a computer, using a word processor, right? So you're going to describe the basics of how to turn on a computer, open Microsoft Office. So your purpose here is to inform, right? So you're not entertaining your reader. You might crack a few jokes along the way, but you're not entertaining your reader. You are informing them. And you're not persuading them either. You're not trying to convince them that this is the best way to turn on a computer or the best way to use Word. You're just simply giving them information, just how to get started. Now here, this is really, really important. Your audience is an adult who has never, keyword never, turned on a computer. So I used to work at a public library, so I'm very familiar with this, where people would come in and they have literally never used a computer. They've never had an email account. They want to get one. You know, one of my favorite activities was a lot of older people would come in. One of my favorite experiences was a guy like almost in his 80s, and he wanted to get his outdoor card. He wanted to renew his hunter certification. And for decades, this guy's been doing it with a pen and a pencil and a piece of paper. But the government said, you can't do that anymore. You got to submit a digital application. And he was really mad. He's angry at the system. He comes into the library, and we helped him out. So it's kind of hard to unlearn things, and it's hard to teach someone how to do something. It's kind of weird. Like if you're really good at something, it can kind of be hard to teach someone how to do it because you forget. You forget what it's like to be a rookie. You forget what it's like to not know those skills. So so you have to go back to that beginner mind and just try to imagine what it's like if you've never used a computer. How do you tell them how to do it, okay? So use the organizer that follows to guide your writing. This organizer, when completed, will serve as a rough copy for your paragraph that will have at least 5 or 6 sentences, right? So you're doing the organization, and then you're actually writing the paragraph, okay? So, right? So if you want those 10 marks, you're doing the organizational chart, and then you're also writing the paragraph. That's at least 5 to 6 sentences. So what you're doing here is step 1. And I would suggest you do this even before you go to the actual organizational chart. I would do some planning, and for this I would just do point form. Maybe something like, this is what I know about using Word. You know, / computers, right? And then you're gonna want to do some point form and just jot down everything you know about using Word, about using computers. So we got the power button. We've got, you know, how to find Word. I would say troubleshooting, you know, how to, you know, tell if it's on, you know, just stuff like that, right? So just like go back to the absolute basics of doing this, right? Maybe like searching for programs. So just stuff like that, okay? And then you pull up your graphic organizer, and the first one is how to turn on a computer and use Microsoft Word. So your topic sentence is, this is how you so you want to write. So remember, when you're doing the organizer, each one of these pages, you know, each page equals 1 sentence, okay? So this is going to give you a template, right? So every time you complete one of these pages, you will have a paragraph, sorry, a sentence that you can add to your paragraph. So remember, when we do a when we write an information paragraph, the first sentence is our topic sentence. It tells the reader what the sentence is about. And it also kind of grabs their attention, right? And that's just an example, right? You don't have to start your sentence, this is how you, but it just sort of, it gives you a starting point, right? So, for example, you know, you might want to jot down some ideas. And so I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. So using a computer to create a Word document can be challenging, but not if you know where or / how something like that. Okay, so using a computer to create a Word document can be challenging, but not if you know yeah, so I like how there. Not if you know how to start, okay? And that works for now. That can be my first sentence, okay? And then going on, so steps are going to be first. So that you're simply going to list your steps here. So and then you could do this like you could start. You could try this. Start with point form. And then write in full sentences. You might do that, right? So so you could ask yourself, I'm gonna write this is the second sentence of my paragraph, but in point form, what I want to do is I want to talk about the power button. So now that I'm actually starting to write things down, I'm thinking that for my second sentence, you know, if you know how to use a computer and if you use a computer every day, turning it on it should not be an issue for you. But if this is your first time, just turning it on is going to be a problem, right? Probably, right? Maybe you're gonna figure it out, but it's gonna be a barrier to someone, right? So I would for sure, for me personally, would spend an entire sentence talking about this process, right? So power button, turning it on. I've got you can't activate a device unless you know where to find it, right? So where to find it. Maybe what it looks like, and then so what I'm doing is I'm starting with the point form. So I want to talk about the power button, turning it on. I want to talk about where to find the power button. I want to talk about what the power button physically looks like. You know, you've got your universal symbols for power, right, is usually that little icon right there. You see that a lot. And then there's sounds and there's lights, right, to know that what it looks like when it turns on. And then you've got your computer monitor, right? So, you know, once you get into this, it's actually a lot more complicated than you think, right? So to do this in one paragraph is a lot, right? So you got to be, you can't cover everything, but you have to be, you know, as comprehensive as you can. And so I would just go through the organizer, and And then, you know, this will be sentence number 3, sentence number 4, sentence 5, 6, 7, you know, however many steps you need. And then your closing sentence, okay? So, and then you wrap it all up, right? So, you know, there are entire books dedicated to how to use Microsoft Word. So you're not going to touch upon all of that in a paragraph, right? So, me personally, I would probably choose to focus on one or the other. So either spend a lot of time talking about just turning it on and finding Microsoft Word, or you could talk about, you know, emphasize more on how to actually use the software itself, okay? And then maybe we'll come back to this tomorrow and then talk a bit about our approach to writing, because that's going to have a huge impact on the article you write. So, and that, of course, is step 1, planning. So we'll come back to this tomorrow, and we'll pick up on assignment 38 then. So we'll see you then.